Next, Jesse Littlewood will discuss how these threats are evolving with new technology. Jesse was the vice president for campaigns at Common Cause, where he led a campaign that recruited 40,000 election protection volunteers in 2020 and has decades of experience in democracy, environmental and public interest advocacy, growing grassroots online and offline support, and raising millions in small dollar funding for nonpartisan causes. Jesse?
Thanks, Ella. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. Disinformation and other messages harmful to voters are prevalent on social media, but have a history of offline tactics. The history of voter suppression, intimidation, and disinformation in our elections is as old as our democracy and has been used often to target populations, particularly voters of color. In Ohio's Franklin County, flyers were put up falsely telling Democratic voters to vote on Wednesday, not Election Day on Tuesday. Voting on Wednesday would cause them to miss their opportunity to vote. In 2012, an anonymous donor paid for a dozen billboards to be placed in predominantly Hispanic and Black neighborhoods in Cleveland with intimidating messages about voter fraud, which, as we know, is extremely rare. So the work of online malign actors to intimidate and deceive voters is often built on previous narratives that have happened offline as well. The social media era has certainly supercharged the ability for these malign actors to spread disinformation and intimidation. And there's a couple of kind of key narratives and themes from online disinformation that have reoccurred over the history of social media disinformation, spanning roughly from 2016 to today. The first is the time, place, and manner of the election. So the theme of deceiving people about how or when or where to cast their ballot and to participate in our elections. The second is attempts to undermine the trust in the process of administering elections and the outcome of an election, particularly with regard to new voter access options like early voting, vote by mail, or drop boxes. The third is false claims of widespread illegal voting. The next is claims of unsolicited ballots with an implication that is going to cause widespread voter fraud, which is not true when there are multiple ballots. Can we go back to that slide, Ella? Thanks. And then the amplification, the next is law enforcement at the polls, which is often can be used to falsely claim as law enforcement at the polls, which is an intimidation outcome. And then last would be the amplification of administrative errors or snags that happen over the course of voting that may have, in fact, in some cases, delayed voting and then can be falsely used to amplify a narrative used to attempt to undermine trust in the whole process, even if that administrative challenge was quickly solved. It's easy enough to share the problem, but not the quick resolution of it. So those are key themes that we often see in online disinformation. We can move forward. Now, how much is it? Well, that's significant. Across all social media, users have self-reported seeing false information across a variety of topics, to be clear, but a significant amount of disinformation and misinformation online, according to users themselves. So at the very least, the disinformation and voter intimidation content that is coming from bad actors is undermining trust and making it more difficult for social media users, where many are getting news and analysis, to understand what is accurate and what is not. You can go ahead one more. Platforms themselves have taken a pretty hands-off approach currently in terms of how they're looking to respond to mis and disinformation. While there's a large universe of content that is pretty harmful to voters, only some of it would probably actually run afoul of platform terms of services, the Facebook, the Twitter, the Googles of the world. And yet, even within that, the experience of the voter protection community is that only some of that content is ever removed. The platform takedown process is one tool that voter protection groups can use to try and protect voters from disinformation, but it is not a solve on its own. one last slide here, which is the upshot and the key points I want folks to know as we move forward about what is the situation with voter suppression, intimidation, and disinformation and social media. It is not necessarily a new problem for targeted populations. However, it is providing new contexts and dangers. The speed of transmission and the little to no cost of creating disinformation content is a challenge. It builds on and amplifies divisions within our society, and it utilizes an enemies frame where we often see disinformation used to get the other team, and this negative partisanship of it is my job as a partisan to try and get the other team. And then last, I do want to note that it contributes to radicalization and threats of political violence by stoking fears. In particular, many of the narratives are aligned with stoking fears of a multiracial democracy and tying it to election disinformation, which creates those conditions where violence is acceptable. Those are 4 key takeaways for social media disinformation.